What's up, Cerebral football fans? My name is Steven Hyder. This is Gate City Sports Channel. Hopefully you guys can hear me. If you can't hear me, go ahead and let me know in the comment section, guys, so I can adjust here. But today I wanted to come on here and I wanted to talk live because, so John McMullen kind of kicked over a hornet's nest during his segment of, kind of Birds 365 today when he got into the Vic Fangio stuff and explained the defensive fronts. Give me 1 second, guys, before we jump into this topic. I'll pull up a graphic for you guys to see while I'm kind of going through this, but I just realized I got TV in the background there, and that's going to be a problem, guys, because it's going to get me striked here. So I'll pull up a tight front for you, or not tight front, but I'll pull up the tight 52 for you. All right, guys, I'm back. So as I was saying earlier today on Inside the Birds 365, sorry, I always get those two mixed up. There was a segment there where John McMullen kind of went into an explanation of explaining Vic Fangio's defensive fronts. Now, I want to start off by saying John McMullen's a smart guy, and he gave a lot of insight there. If you have not watched that segment, I would go to Birds 365 and I would actually watch. It's towards the end, like the last 40, 45 minutes or so of the show. They kind of get into this. It's definitely worth listening to. I think he did a really good job of explaining the differences between those 50 fronts, the difference between those 40 fronts. But I think we need to get into something because you heard John McMullen talk about something called a tight front. And I think that what would have helped is if he could have had an illustration. Not everyone could be such a great artist like me. I know you guys saw that artwork I did there. I mean, I don't know if you guys can tell, but I won my 3rd grade art contest. I'm terrible at this kind of stuff, guys. I'm not a great artist, but I just sketched something together really quickly. So that way I could give a visual representation of what we're talking about. So the tight front, let me just start off by talking about like what the tight front is. The tight front is what we would probably call, most of us you would hear it referred to as a 52 front, right? Basically what you would have here is 2 4 eyes, a zero technique or a shaded player, zero shaded. And then you'd have 2 linebackers behind them. And of course you have your overhangs, which are not pictured. Okay. Your overhangs are not pictured in this illustration. Don't worry about that, guys. We'll get to it. The first thing to realize here, and McMullen was talking about this, is the way that you have those 4 eyes. So I'll show you the way it's shaded. So if you guys ever see these illustrations and you're not sure like how to read them, like what they're showing you, this is kind of a good exercise for you to see here. All right, you see how the white is shaded to the inside shoulder with Milton Williams and Jalen Carter, right? That's illustrating that they would be what we call a 4-eye run technique. So a 4-eye run technique, or 4-eye, as you can tell, right away it's meant to basically be challenging for the run. It is meant to, especially if you're gapping in a half, you're playing gap in a half, it makes it a little bit easier to follow if you got something such as like a gap scheme, something like that, where you got motion and movement from like a guard or a tackle or something. You can basically follow their hips right to the football. Basically, it's the whole point of gap in a half, right? You have your primary, responsibility in terms of the gap, and you have the secondary responsibility. So that's the first thing to look at. I'll show you one more time, guys, is you're looking at this tight front, AKA 52. And what you're getting here is 2 4 eyes along with a zero technique, or you could technically shade him one side or the other, but most of the times you're going to see that as a zero technique, 2 overhangs outside of that numbers right there, outside of those guys, if you will. All right. The difference is, and I know you guys have probably heard different terms used for Vic Fangio, and John McMullen didn't raise this one, so I'll raise it for you guys to talk about the differences here. Is the other one, and I know you've heard me specifically talk about it, is what's called a penny front. So when you get to penny fronts are, instead of being a 52, now you're talking about a 51. A 51 is a penny front. So a penny front essentially looks like, once again, you're going to have your guys shaded normally inside. So in a 4-eye technique, you're going to have Jordan Davis as a zero technique again, or shaded. And then you're going to have a single linebacker who's going to be aligned, or basically, as we call it, a 51 front. Call it a penny front, call it a 51 front. It really means the same thing. All right. Explaining some of this and how it fits, what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish here. To be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of penny fronts personally, just because I feel like if you're going to be in a run dominant position, then be in a run dominant position. Although I will say the one thing to watch out for when we were talking about not a tight front, but a penny front, the one thing you need to watch out for, guys, is the fact that you now have these versatile players, right? You have the Sidney Browns, okay? You have these type of versatile guys, right? I don't know what's going to happen at the nickel corner position, so I can't say if Avonte Maddox or Tyler Hall or Isaiah Rodgers, but you got dudes that can play as a nickel corner and be a force defender in the run game. Those dudes, we all know Avonte Maddox is a little suspect when we come to injury prevention there, but I don't doubt the young man's toughness in that situation. That's where, you kind of look at these situations and then you you have to make judgment calls, right? Like you got Cooper DeJean. Cooper DeJean's another one, right? That versatility, being safety, kind of being, a nickel corner type. Those type of guys can impact why you might want to use a 51, because you could bring up 7 in the box, but have more versatility, more athleticism, instead of having 2 linebackers, having that extra safety or nickel corner to then drop into coverage if need be, if you get play actioned, things like that. So that's the basis of why you might play penny over tight front. But that tight front is what you will see a lot on first down, as John McMullen stated, and I think he's very correct on it, which is you're going to have 5 down linemen. They're going to be 2 4-eyes. You're going to have a 0 technique. You're going to have 2 overhangs outside of your 4 techniques, and you'll have 2 linebackers. Listen, do not get overly caught up in who I'm putting there as like the players, okay? They're not in camp yet, guys. There are many battles to be had. I'm just taking educated guesses at this point in the middle of May. Who knows once they get to camp, guys? I mean, that could easily change quickly. I wouldn't get too caught up in the weeds there with that particular set of circumstances, who I'm putting the guys in. Like, we can get into that later on in the discussion and kind of talk about where guys would be. But yeah, it's a little tough, guys. Like that's definitely a little tough to kind of figure out, if you will. All right. Getting into a little bit more further, I think you have to go back and understand the history of where this comes from. And I don't know if you guys ever heard this said before. I think a lot of you guys have, because I've had you guys ask me before, like, dude, how is Vic Fangio's scheme even remotely related to Buddy Ball? How is this even remotely related to the 46 scheme that Buddy Ryan ran? Truth be told, it is and it isn't. It's one of these things to where, like, you're talking about adaptations, but they're clearly not apples for apples. I mean, if you guys don't know the 46 defense, it's not 4 down linemen and 6 linebackers. The 46 defense really comes into fruition from what happened in Chicago, to where while he was in Chicago, he had a safety named Doug Plank that he named his defense after. That particular alignment. He called it a 46 because he would bring 46, the safety, down into the box to create a 4th linebacker, if you will. So it's really an alteration to a 43 front, but they're running it out of a typically what you would see from a 30 front. So there's these weird alterations here that Buddy was playing around with, to where he was covering guard, center, guard, which that's called a bear front, when you cover both guards in the center. And then he's bringing down a 4th defender into the box. You get what I'm saying? From that safety position, bringing them down as a linebacker into that box. So he's putting 8 in the box, basically, right? It was a way to really alter and be able to get strong in the run game while maintaining some of the flexibility of having a safety in case you got to drop into coverage with those linebackers, right? So it gives you that ability. Now, I will say on the outside, guys, they ran bump and run. We don't do a whole lot of that, guys. You're not going to see a whole lot of bump and run here in Philadelphia, guys. It's not going to happen. But the alteration, as I understood it, now I'm going to tell you this. I've had some of you guys who play collegiately. A lot of you guys who have played collegiately kind of put me on the game here to say, hey, Gate, I know you're going to talk about Frank Beamer, and Frank Beamer is the person who gained the notoriety behind what you're about to say. But it really started in Washington, the University of Washington, back in the 1980s. Guys, I don't remember the name of this coach, but some of the guys in the community kind of put me onto the game here, that they're former collegiate offensive linemen and defensive linemen, and they kind of know a little bit more about the history in terms of that stuff, guys. So I'm going to talk mostly about Frank Beamer. Just that's my generation. It's who I know. But there was a dude out in Washington who he predates Frank Beamer in this system in itself. So Frank Beamer comes along with Virginia Tech, guys. You remember Frank Beamer ball out in Virginia Tech, and he starts running this alteration of Buddy Ryan's scheme. And it's a 44, right? It's a 44 front. And that's kind of what Buddy Ryan's scheme was. It was truly and honestly a 44 front, but eventually teams started to spread Buddy out, right? They started running spread offenses, and that it killed it. So then you get into this, Frank Beamer version of it, to where you get this quote, this term, to where he would call it his tight package, I believe is how he phrased it, a tight package, to where he changed it's still the concept of a 44, but he changed the physical alignment of the defensive lineman. He was no longer coming in there and covering guard, center, guard. That's when he starts kicking out. You get the 4 eyes, you get a nose tackle on there. You're bringing the guy down into the body. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you start getting this differences, if you will, in terms of the way that they're playing the front. So I'll give you guys an idea of like what a tough front looks like. And when John McMullen was talking about this today, it doesn't help because he doesn't have enough time to give you the history behind everything. But what he's talking about, guys, is this formation of this 44 front, which, by the way, in the modern NFL, they don't run a 44 front anymore. It's more of a 4-2-5. It's a nickel-based front, right? But you can see here, you've got 2 eyes, or you can play a 2-eye and a 3 technique. So I got a 3 technique to Jalen Carter side, 2-eye to Jordan Davis side. You can put 2 eyes there. You can play 2-3 techniques there. It's really up to the person, right? And then you got Josh Sweat, who's going to be on the weak side of the defense. So Jordan Davis and Josh Sweat are on the weak side of the defense. By the way, for all my football, kind of up-and-comers who are studying the game, this is just simply put, it's an alteration to an overfront, guys. They're just playing an overfront with a unique spin to it. Josh Sweat's aligned as a 5 technique. Jordan Davis is in there as a 2-eye. You got Devin White is also to the weak side of that in this particular situation. Mind you guys, you can change the names out. This is just showing you, illustrating how they are, right? Then you got Nakobe Dean, who would be covering up from the second level, guys. He's not down on the line of scrimmage. From the second level, he's covering the A gap there. You got Jalen Carter playing a 3 technique. And then Bryce Huff is who I kind of put out here as a starter. He's going to be, there's different ways of playing this, guys. He could play as a 6-eye inside shoulder of the tight end. He could play as a 6 or a 7, or a 7 to where he's like heads up over the tight end. Or he could play as a 6 where he's heads up over the tight end, or he could play as a 7, which is outside. So he could play 6-eye, 6, or a 7 technique. The bottom line is, guys, he's affecting the tight end. Okay. And then you got your 2 linebackers. So you're in a 4-2-5, guys. That's what the tough front means. To put this into very simple, explainable terms, essentially what John's talking about is how we go from odd fronts to even fronts. Odd fronts on early downs or obvious run down situation stuff. That's where you get into either playing a tight front or playing a penny front. And then you get into the more pass rush situations. That's when he's talking about going into the tough fronts, the TUFF stuff he's talking about, the tough fronts. That's that. This is another alteration from Buddy Ryan to Frank Beamer to kind of like the way the modern NFL kind of runs this defense now. Now, mind you, he's playing quarters coverage behind it. This is not an apples to Buddy ball, guys. Do not think you're getting Buddy Ryan's defense here. This is not the 46 defense. It's not even close to it. It's borrowing elements of that defense. Now, what I will say that he didn't get into, and I think it's important to know this in terms of, in particular, when we go to a 40 front, not only do we struggle to stop the run, and I'm going to give you a pretty dang good illustration why we struggle to stop the run, but there are times that we can get play actioned or RPO to death inside of a 4-2-5, or what they call that tough front. And I'm going to show you why. Look to the weak side, guys. So the center is the one that's not shaded. There's no shading on it, right? Then you got your guard, you got your tackle, right? So you got Jordan Davis in a 2-eye. So he's kind of playing that, backside A gap he could play the B gap if you need him to, but he's going to probably play the backside A gap. That's probably his responsibility here, right? Then you got Josh Sweat, or name another player, guys. It doesn't matter. I'm not partial to who's out there, but he's shaded as a 5 technique. So he's going to have that outside kind of like C gap responsibility. Then you got Devin White, who's playing above them on the weak side, who's got to come down and fill to that B gap. Okay. So he's got to come down and fill to the B gap there. The problem with this is when you're in a tough alignment, guys, when you come down and you fill, so you're filling to the B gap, so you get RPO to play action, RPO in particular. Now he pulls the ball back, and now you got a guy cutting behind you, right? You got an in-breaking route behind you, and it's just an easy catch and completion, especially if the corner lets the receiver cross his face. That's kind of the problem with these types of fronts, is that, like, mind you, how often did we get worked over the middle of the field last year, guys? Like, that's what I'm alluding to. That's what I'm getting to, is that, like, there are some versatility here. There are ways of manipulating the eyes. This is the base structure, and then you build off the base to manipulate those things. I think that's what Vic Fangio is going to do better than other coordinators have done. But that is some of the inherent weaknesses. And obviously, if we're saying that this is an inherent weakness for the passing game, not being able to cover the passing game, and we're talking about RPOs, well, then we got to also talk about what it could do to you, I'm sorry, guys, in terms of the actual run game. Let me switch slides for you. This time I'm showing you Devin White falling back into coverage, right? They go to RPO it, Devin, or whatever they're going to do. They're doing a delayed handoff. There's different ways of manipulating this, guys. You can play action it, you can RPO it, you can do a delayed handoff. There's different ways of catching you, right? They're going to attack that weak side of the defense is what I'm basically trying to get to, guys. So when Devin White drops back, or insert Will linebacker, drops back, well, now you've got an open gap here on the B front. So it's really going to be on Josh Sweat and Jordan Davis to really kind of read this quickly and kind of come out of their own gaps to kind of cover up there. And like Jordan Davis is the guy I think really has to be that impact on the weak side. And obviously, guys, you can replace Jordan Davis's name. There's nothing to say that Milton Williams could not play that role. He has played it prior to it. There's nothing to say that even like Josh Sweat you couldn't remove Josh Sweat as the 5 technique and put Milton Williams in there, or Jalen Carter, or so forth and so forth. You can do those things, right? You can mix up your personnel. It's not an apples to apples. It's not an easy comparison thing. Like, there's multiple ways to get there, right? Like, there's multiple ways to skin the cat, if you will. The other side of this, guys, is when you look to the strong side of the defense. I'll show you this again. You got the run game, right? Nakobe Dean comes up and he's trying to fill, right? Well, if Nakobe Dean doesn't fill and he's dropping back into pass protection, you do have an A gap that's wide open. So you're really depending upon Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis to read something and get over there and shut it down, especially if Nakobe Dean gets stuck in concrete. I'm not saying Nakobe Dean does, guys. It's not a evaluation of his play. I'm just stating the way that defenses work, where they try to hold you up. That's the problem with strong side is that I think you have a lot more protections in pass, but you get what I'm saying, guys. Like it's easy to see how you can get caught up really quickly if you don't fill quickly to the strong side. Now, when you see Bryce Huff, this is what I'll tell you in terms of how you manipulate this side from the passing game, right? So you saw I had Bryce Huff kind of shaded directly over top. So I'm saying like basically he's in a 6, call it a 6 eye, call it a 7, inside, over top, or only outside shoulder, guys. It doesn't matter. He's there to disrupt the tight end. Well, there's one way of taking care of that, right? You can just simply detach the tight end from the formation, couldn't you? Right? It's that simple. Now, what you are doing is you're allowing Bryce Huff to get a clean release. So if he flattens and bends to your quarterback fast enough, he's going to disrupt the play and you're in trouble. However, you can put stress on Nakobe Dean. So you could hold Nakobe Dean a little better. So you're holding Bryce Huff and you're holding Nakobe Dean with play action or with RPO type stuff, right? So where you're making them try to dictate what they're going to do, then you're going to react off of that. Because now that you got a guy detached from the formation, you can now come right into Nakobe Dean's spot right behind him if he comes forward on a play action, RPO, delayed handoff type thing, right? Well, delayed handoff, it's a handoff. But you guys, you get what I'm saying, guys. Like when you can, there's different ways of accomplishing those goals there. And that's kind of the issue here. It's like when you look at these defenses, they're incredibly intuitive. They're incredibly, smart. I love Vic Fangio's style. I do think that people are making this stuff more difficult than what it is. These fronts, like, don't get me wrong, the coverage can be, when you're playing quarters-based principles, like there's a lot of communication. It can be difficult. But from a defensive line standpoint, I don't think these things are as difficult as people are making them. I think the hard part of Vic Fangio stuff is not him playing a tight front. It's not him playing, a penny front. It's not him if he went bare and was covering up the guard, both guards in the center. It's not him moving out into a tough front. That stuff's not hard to do, guys. These guys know what they're doing. It's when you get to the gap integrity stuff, right? To where you're asking your players to think before they just go, right? Jim Schwartz, no thinking, just go, right? You get to Fangio's system, there's a little bit more thought there. You got to remember, guys, what is the goal of a Fangio defense in terms of the run game? I've told you this, guys, several times at this point. The entire goal is to spill it outside. You want to spill it outside to the overhangs and the fill guys coming down to play the run. That's the goal of a Fangio front. If you don't do that and you just leave these wide open lanes, in the middle, going through basically that 1 and 2 gaps, it's going to be a long, long day, guys. Like, those 1 and 2 holes will be exploited all day long. You can even go 3 and 4 holes. If you're not controlling the middle of the line there, you're going to have problems with this front in particular. This front will absolutely eat you alive in the run game. That's why, me personally, I don't love that if you don't have highly reactive and smart corners, you start getting the Jonathan Gannon first year crap to where dudes are just playing catch out there on the football field, hitting 85% of their passes on us. It's a ridiculous number to have a quarterback do that to you, right? Those kind of things bother me, right? And then like with Fangio, I do think that sometimes he can be a little susceptible and he can be easy to be got in the run game. But this is what I want to point out. Fangio said something in his press conference that I think is worth mentioning, which is, hey, man, these schemes are only as good as the players. This is straightforward, guys. The schemes are only freaking as good as the players. I'm going to take you all the way back to the basis thing. We were talking about Buddy Ball, right? We were talking about what was going on with Buddy Ryan and how, Buddy adapted and made that 46 front and like how that was bringing 8 people in the box. And because you're bringing a safety down to be the 4th linebacker, that gives you that ability to drop back and do some stuff from a deception standpoint, if you will, right? Well, I mean, look at what he had there. I mean, Doug Plank is the reason they call it the 46 front. He wore number 46 for the Chicago Bears. It was named after him, the play, that particular alignment was. However, I mean, look, they had Dan Hampton. I think Dan Hampton's a Hall of Famer, if I'm not mistaken, guys. Mike Singletary, Richard Dent. For my older guys, I know y'all remember William the Refrigerator Perry, or Fuller, my bad. And then you had guys, you go to the Eagles. Like, look at the Eagles team and who he had there, guys. I mean, Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, Jerome Brown, Seth Joyner. Like, I mean, he was loaded. He was loaded. Yes, the concept worked. That 46 defensive concept, which is an alteration to a 44 front, guys, it worked. But, I mean, come on, man. Dan Hampton, Mike Singletary, Richard Dent, William the Fridge, Fuller, Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, Jerome Brown, Seth Joyner. No crap, it worked. Look at the talent level. Look at the talent level that he's playing with, guys. I mean, Come on now. I mean, that's incredibly talented. Isn't, we're not even talking about other guys. I mean, I'm leaving all kinds of names out of here, guys, just because it's so many dudes to even talk about. I mean, there's so many really quality players that Buddy Ryan had his hands on in the 80s into the early 90s between Chicago and Philadelphia. Like, I mean, he really was working with a great cast of players, and that's a large part of it. And that kind of brings us into like Vic Fangio. Like, it's got to be the young guys, man. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, right? Those guys. Bryce Huff, Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat, Zach Baun. Like, those guys have got to be like, you know what I mean? Nakobe Dean's got to turn into a guy this year, right? I mean, I do think Nakobe Dean is actually an underrated run defender. I know he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's super instinctive. Devin White's got to be a guy this year. I know Zach Baun, we talked about him as an edge, but, we heard him reference that they might use him as well as an off-ball stack linebacker as well. They might want a little bit of size, a little bit of arm reach there in terms of playing inside. Players are going to matter, right? What they're doing in the secondary, right? Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, then you're looking at DeJean, my bad. Then you're looking at, guys like Darius Slay, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown. Like, those dudes got to be players, man. If the players are right, I've got confidence that this system will be very, very right. Got to start with the players first, guys. The players have got to be right first. All right, I'm going to get to some questions, and we can talk a little bit if you guys want to about opinions in terms of personnel, who you guys think might be here, how they might get flexible, things like that, guys. We can get into those type of discussions. Chiquita, what's up? How you doing? Hi, Domination. What's up, man? Yo, what's up, Gates? How you doing, buddy? China, what's going on? Family's doing well. I got both the girls actually home today. So one got sick at school today, and the other one's just passed out after her feeding. So, yeah, figured I'd just come on and do a live stream. What up, Cody? How you doing, buddy? I'm doing well, man. Antonio, what's good, buddy? How you doing, man? EEZ, what's going on, buddy? He says, yo, Gate, is it true that Vic doesn't have a strong/weak safety and boundary field corner in his system? Basically, safeties and corners need to play all roles. Yeah, I don't think that's a crazy take, to be honest, EEZ. We've heard Nick say this crap about his receivers and his alignments, right? I mean, it's not a stretch to think that Vic, when we say he doesn't have boundary or field corners or strong or weak safeties, he's meaning he's not going to flip formation to get his free safety over to the field side, or, over to the boundary side of things, right? Where he's going to have to play that role of the cover 2 side of if you're playing like a cover 6, where you got half the field's playing, cover 2 and the other half of the field is playing, quarters coverage. He's not going to keep flipping his safeties to do that. He's not going to flip his corners. Like, if you got Quinyon Mitchell, let's say a year from now, Quinyon Mitchell is your field corner. He's taking over for Darius Slay. And let's say that Cooper DeJean is going to play like some hybrid nickel safety role. And let's say that they're going to take the young guy from Georgia. Oh, gosh, she's slipping my mind right now, guys. Kaylee Ringo. And they're going to play Kaylee Ringo on the boundary. He's not going to flip him. Like, if he's if Kaylee Ringo is the right cornerback and the left side of the field becomes the boundary, he's not going to flip that. So like in that sense, easy. Like, yeah, I think that you have a point. Like, the modern NFL, they don't do a lot of that stuff anymore. In terms of the safeties, I think it's a little bit more of a complex answer, but you could still use that idea of like, they're not going to flip the field for that per se. Like, they're just going to have both guys do that responsibility. But I think where you get into some nuance easy, and I don't have the answer for it yet, is when you talk about rocking safeties. So if you're going to talk about rocking a safety into the box, which, you heard John McMullen say that Vic Fangio is not really a fan of doing that, but you have to do stuff. Every now and then you have to give a different look. You can't always be the same look. So he's going to have to rock safeties from time to time. So when you rock a safety, is it always going to be your strong safety? Or are you going to rock that free safety? Because I can tell you, previous coordinators, whether it was Sean Desai, whether it was Jonathan Gannon, those guys did not, they would rock either one. Mostly the strong, but they weren't afraid to bring like CJ Gardner-Johnson down as a free and rock him into the box either. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great point, easy. I think it's just a modern adaptation. I think it's beyond just Vic Fangio. I think it's just a modern adaptation to spread offenses now. And I just think that's how they kind of do things now. What's up, really, Philly? How you doing, buddy? Antonio says, can we please cover the middle of the field? We'll see, sir. I'm not going to make any bold statements, Antonio. We'll see as the season goes on, sir. No thinking, just go. I remember saying that to my friends while hiking on shrooms in Asset. No thinking, just go. I hear you, Dank. Yeah, I mean, that was the Jim Schwartz system, right? It was a one gap scheme to where he's like, look, I don't play the ball on the way to the quarterback. That was his system. Easy said Fangio is a master at manipulating the protections of the O line. Good point, Easy, right? Trying to manipulate how you do 6 or 7 man protections. I agree with you. I believe the Dolphins were number one ranked in scheming free rushers. There you go, right? Simulated pressure, how they simulate pressure. Dank says, yes, number one in unblocked pressures and sacks. That goes to another point, guys. And I'll keep reading the comments, but I think this is an important thing to bring up is that someone had I apologize to the young man if he watches this live stream, but someone had given a super chat, and I think that the young man that's the co-host, I don't remember his name, that's the co-host with John McMullen now, not Jody Mack anymore. I think he didn't quite understand what the young man was saying in his super chat, but he was basically asking him about simulated pressure, and then like basically what he's asking him is are they going to use is Vic Fangio going to use these leakers, what they call it, the idea of you're going to leak your edges out right into the flats, and then from there you're going to use replacement blitzes. So on occasion you leak the edge out, then you bring a replacement blitzer, linebacker level, safety level, corner level, doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Just is it a whip coming from the weak side? Is it going to be like fire zone blitz stuff coming from the linebackers? Like I think that's what he was talking about. I think they didn't quite understand what he was saying. But I do think that's a good point in terms of like simulated pressure and the fact that he led it. And it's because he does use those things, right? Where he does leak out the edges. He will use replacement blitzes, those type of things. Now, I think the percentage of that may be what the young man was trying to get to. Like, is it being a little overstated? Does he do that? When I'm saying leakers, guys, you're hearing it referred to as being creeper concept. Are we overhearing an overanalysis of what they call the creepers? Creepers are the edges falling to the flats. Okay. And then you have that replacement blitz coming, on either the side that's creeping or an overloaded side from the opposite side. I don't know, guys. It's hard to say. Yes, Fangio is the real deal. Just hope that our young guys take that next step. Yeah, exactly. Right. The talent's got to be there. Easy. The talent behind the scheme. I love the fact that, like he said in his press conference, like, I'm not going to scheme you out of trouble. That's not my job. My job is to make sure when I see something is wrong is to get you back to the basics and get this thing under control. It's your job to figure out ways of winning these football games. It's an interesting take from Fangio. I think a lot of younger coordinators do tend to think like, no, like, we'll alter things, and I do think that, to all the defaults of Desai, he was terrible at coming in with the game plans. I think teams were just absolutely picking him apart during the first quarter of games. But after halftime, I thought he was really good at adjustment coach. I thought he made really good adjustments. I think his strength was in scheme, not in player management. I think that's what undid him in Philadelphia. But yeah, I mean, yeah, we got to hope that the talent level rises to the occasion. Derek said, with the current players we have, will this defense be good or better than last season? Derek, I think it's going to be better than last season, but I mean, we're talking about like the level of improvement. You know what I mean? That's the part I can't predict until they get in the season. Like, I think just the added youth, I don't know if they're going to keep Bradbury. My hunch is that Bradbury's gone after June 1st, but I mean, it depends, man. I mean, these guys got to show they can communicate. Like, if you can't communicate in a Vic Fangio defense, it's going to be bad. I think Vic Fangio went out there and he targeted dudes that, if you guys went back to my draft profiles, you go back to these live streams I had, what did I always tell you guys about Cooper DeJean? What did I always tell you guys about, players like Quinyon Mitchell and those guys? I said, despite them being a little different in the hip fluidity, the thing that stands out about those two players to me is the eyes. They process and see route combinations better than a lot of the other guys in this class do. Like, they're at the upper echelon of what I'm seeing here. I think that's what Vic was looking for. I think he wants those processing guys there. And I think from the coverage standpoint, that's going to play a big role. Like, yes, you need youth. You need guys that can turn their hips and run. There's no doubt about that, Derek. Like, there's going to be these man concepts built into a zone system. When you're thinking quarters, guys, all this we're talking about space on the football field, right? So, like, if I come down here and I draw a quarter of the field, right? Quarter of the field, and then you're all the way over here is the other quarter, right? You're talking about dividing the field up into 25%. And then you have the coverage rules, right? The quarters starts as quarters and can become anything. So the first objective is try to narrow the amount of space that you're defending. 4 deep, 3 under, right? That's quarters. But then you have these specialized coverage rules and you have these mixed coverages that you can do off of those. That, the coverage rules could be just simply like, are you playing drop quarters? So we're just dropping in your zone. Are you playing match quarters to where, if a guy is anything under 7 yards, you're carrying with that guy across the field? You know what I mean? That's your responsibility. If the guy pushes vertically, are you passing him off to somebody? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's different things. Like, are you match carrying and delivering? You're carrying that guy under 7 yards until he gets to the next part of the zone, then you pass him off to the next defender. Like, there's these coverage rules that come with that. That's, it requires a ton of film work. It requires a ton of on-field practice, and you got to communicate well. Like, I think that's why Vic is making a big deal, Derek, about like, we need practice time. And I think what he's trying to stress is like the progressive nature of our practices that we've had when we had an older roster, which I do think in some ways was smart to try to load manage these veteran guys. That probably is going to be out the window with a younger roster now. And with the fact that we've got to coach these guys up from the schematics. So you're going to need longer practices. You can't run 2 days. You can't, they regulate how often you can put pads on and hit and all that stuff. But you can extend the window of how long you practice. Like, we're not using the full window is kind of my point. And I think you might see something like that. What's up, Unspoken? How you doing, buddy? China said, I love that Fangio said having good players because the scheme doesn't mean much without players that can. Yeah, exactly, China. Like, I mean, you can be as creative as possible. You can come up with, you can have all the solution, you have all the answers. But if a guy's not where he's supposed to be because he doesn't understand, like, it doesn't do you any good. If a guy lacks the athleticism to essentially play, like, in a quarters concept, if you play man on deep or you're playing man everywhere he goes, you're building those concepts in, and the guy just doesn't have the hip fluidity, doesn't have the foot speed to keep up. He can't trail, he can't track, he can't close the gaps, doesn't have recovery speed. Like, that's a problem, right? Like, it doesn't matter what Vic Fangio does. That guy's going to get beat. Many spots up for grabs. What's up, Dank? He said, and a loaded room in the secondary going to be good for everyone. Tough competition in camp ahead. Yeah, I agree with you, Dank. I'm trying to be a little guarded. Like, I put guys up that I'm thinking about as I was making the charts, but I'm trying to warn people, don't assume that that's going to be the starters when the season rolls around. I don't know. It's just a perception in May, guys. Like, that can easily change once they get into camp. Seems Cooper will start at corner. Yeah, I think they're looking at him more as like a nickel safety hybrid type role. Easy. That's what it looks like to me, which really would, if that's the case, easy. I think that there could be some problems for Avonte Maddox, man. I don't see how they're going to carry him unless they're just going to, I don't know. I mean, I guess they could technically sit Cooper behind Avonte, but I don't know. I think that could be problematic for Avonte Maddox. What's up, James? This is a hi, coach. Do you think Fangio will want Justin Simmons? I mean, yeah. I mean, he's familiar with his scheme. I think it's a contractual and monetary thing going on right now with why the sides haven't come together. The longer he stays on the market, I think the better the chances become that you could potentially sign a player like that. I think that the longer he's out there, the better it'll be for the Eagles. Which King says, do you think Jordan Davis is going to take that next step this season? I mean, I thought in the first half of last season, Jordan Davis was showing a lot of progress. I think the conditioning wasn't quite to where it needed to be. So there's 2 approaches here. Approach number 1 is that Vic Fangio does what I have not noticed from him, which is he keeps a better rotation than what he's done in the past with other organizations. I have not seen that from him in Miami, in Denver in particular. I haven't had a chance to really get through a lot of the underlying analytics and film for the Bears yet, but I'll see if maybe it pops up there with the Bears. What I will say is this. There's 2 approaches. Number 1, the guy gets in better shape. He just play more. And that's the preferential way of going about this, right? Which King? But the other side of this is that you can load manage the guy, right? You know he's effective if you keep him fresh. You got to keep him fresh. But that requires a rotation. So, that's – I don't know. I mean, only time will tell which King, to be quite honest. What's up, Jason? How you doing, buddy? Says, Gate, good to see you on here again. Dank says Xander Cross, the son of the owner of Jack. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I thought his name started with a Z. I just couldn't remember what it was. Like, I'm familiar with who he is. I just couldn't think of his name. I appreciate that, Dank. Yeah, because I would have been on here for like an hour trying to figure it out. Running it through my mind. Has there been any news rumors about Jordan, Nolan, et cetera, working with pass rushing gurus this offseason? Not that I've heard of personally, easy. I mean, I can definitely scan the not waiver wires, but I can definitely scan the information outlets and just see what pops up. But so far, like, I haven't really heard anything in terms of like those guys going and working with anyone. It'd be interesting to see how they, like, here's one thing that I always thought about easy is like, so when you're talking about guys like Zach Baun, right? We talked about like Nakobe Dean, Zach Baun. We talked about Devin White. These guys can be used as pass rushers. Now, you could say that they can be used from the off-ball perspective in terms of fire zone, Steve. They don't have to necessarily be as overhangs. It's true. Or they could play a hybrid role as an overhang. Kaiser White did it with Jonathan Gannon, the season he was here in 22. And then, we know that there's much to be made about Andrew Von Ginkel from Miami last year and the way that Vic Fangio used him. So the thing I'm getting to, easy in terms of the complexity of the coaching is that King coaches the linebackers, but Jeremiah Washburn coaches the edges. So I don't know how you split the time in terms of developing them. Like that's an interesting one, guys. I don't know the answer unless I'm in the room or I'm on the field watching what's happening and how they're dividing that up. I don't know, man. There's got to be some splitting of time done there. What's up, Murder Music? How you doing, buddy? Did you hear Goodell wants to get off preseason games and just start the season early? Yeah, I mean, I think that you could definitely scrap it in favor of these joint practices that teams are doing. I don't think a lot of teams take the preseason very seriously. I know that there are some guys that definitely hurts in terms of the back end roster guys and dudes that are probably fighting for practice squad spots and things like that. Like, sure, those guys could earn legitimate spots because of their preseason performances. There's no doubt about it. But most of the decisions are made from your camp performance and what you do in those joint practices, to be honest. Unspoken says, so you think DeJean is going to be a hybrid nickel safety? Do you see Blankenship on the field with him? Yeah, I think I think Blank's going to definitely play. I mean, when you get into to me, Unspoken, I don't really care who takes the first snap of the game, and I know that qualifies them as the starter. To me, it's snap counts, right? It's a total snap count, and that's what I can't predict when it gets to Blankenship, Cooper DeJean, Sidney Brown. Like obviously C.J. Gardner-Johnson's going to play, but those guys I don't know. I don't necessarily have the answer to the way that ratio is going to work out yet. We have mandatory OTAs coming up this month. Yeah, it's true, China. A little different approach, right? A little different thing we've seen from Nick this time around. Dank said, I'm all for getting those games started. China said, yeah, same thing. Yeah, I think I agree with that too, is that number one, the injury bugs that pop up in the preseason. I'm not saying that those still wouldn't occur if you're just playing a game there, but at least the guy's getting a game check. You know what I mean, guys? Like, at least he got a game check before he got injured. There's a lot of little underlying things there that I think it might be smart to kind of move away from preseason games, and maybe you can add another joint practice. You have 3 joint practices over 2, something like that, and then just start your season like a week or so earlier. You think we need another defensive tackle? D-line looking weak. That's yeah. I think you can make that case. Yeah, I mean, as I'm running through my head, I'm looking at depends on the rotation and how heavy the rotation will be. To be quite honest, past that, look, you got your 3 big guys, right? You got Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Milton Williams. Your big 3 kind of guys that are going to be heavy in rotation, no doubt about it. They're going to be utilized and used as interior D linemen. You got a guy like Brandon Graham that can come in and take some snaps here and there. You got a guy like, Josh Sweat that can play in some of the things we were talking about earlier where you can play him as a 5 technique. So he can be hands in the dirt if you need him to be. I don't think he's a 3 technique. I don't think he's that kind of player. I think you want him in space as much as you can. Marlon Tuipulotu is probably the most experienced backup past that right now that's still on the roster. And he's on the final year of his rookie contract. You get past Marlon Tuipulotu and you got projections, right? That's what we had. You got a guy in Moro Ojamo that I know that he's my most viewed video on this freaking channel. And I liked him a lot coming out of the draft, and I thought he was definitely one of the steals of the draft. With that said, he hasn't played a lot. It's all projection, guys. It's just me making projections that I think he's a really, really good run defender, and he's got some upside as, a guy who can get a pass rush. Like with some growth, he can be a pretty effective pass rusher. I don't know how long that takes, though, for him to become kind of an impact player. Is that going to be this year he's going to start being an impact guy? Is that more next year? He's going to have an uptick in snaps this year, but then next year you're looking for, you know what I mean? There's these different ways of looking at it. What's the guy's name? Gabe something. The young man we signed as a UDFA. There's a lot of interest around him. I haven't had a chance yet. I think it's Gabe Hall. I haven't had a chance yet to really look over his film. I saw some of the advanced analytics behind his play, and it is quite impressive. Now I want to see the film, see just basically how he was being utilized and the way he was playing. Mustafa is a backup nose tackle kind of type that we got. He played a little bit, I think, in Denver, but he's not an overly experienced guy. Like, I mean, yeah, you can make the case that, outside of once you get past like the big three, Marlon Tuipulotu is the only guy that's ever really played any kind of real snaps in the NFL, significant at least. So yeah, I mean, you could definitely make that case that, especially if you don't love Marlon Tuipulotu coming back from was some kind of a knee injury, right? Wasn't it an ACL or something? If you don't love that, then yeah, I think that absolutely. Yeah, I don't think that's a stretch at all. What's good, Gay City? What's up, Philly Ace? How you doing, bro? Hanging in there, man. How about you? Does Cooper have good hip sticky coverage? I hear mixed reports on him in that aspect. I don't believe so, to be honest. If I'm going to be real about it, easy. A lot of straight line speed. The kid can run. But in terms of when you see players that are kind of cutting and they're getting to the top of the routes and they're cutting back, I do think his hips are a little tight in that area. I don't think that he always is very fluid in the movement there in terms of having that fluidity in the hips. But what I will say about Cooper DeJean is that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And that's a really weird saying, guys. I don't know why that's a saying, but you guys get what I mean. There's more than one way of accomplishing that. But the simple fact is he understands angles. So even though his hips aren't the most fluid, when he was playing on the field side, mostly played field. He didn't play a ton of boundary. But when he was out there playing field, he would just read the angle better. Like the guys would get separation from him, but he just read the angle well. So I mean, I don't know if that's going to maintain in the NFL. He's got to show that easy. I do think that if I'm going to play Cooper DeJean on the outside, I don't think that the Eagles, I wouldn't just trust guys that he's going to be a nickel hybrid safety. That's an assumption I'm making, guys. We don't know that until they get into camp. I view him more as a boundary if they're going to play him on the outside. Now, as we stated before, easy, we're calling the boundary corner the right cornerback, but they don't flip them. It's not like they're going to be like, oh no, the boundary's on the left, move them. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to do that. So I mean, he's going to have to be able to play both. So I think you would think by percentages, your right cornerback's going to play more boundary than field. Your left cornerback's going to play more field than boundary, but they're both going to be asked to do it. We'll see. Yeah, I think he's a really good straight line speed guy. I think that dude is tough as nails in the run game. And I think that he could be really effective kind of in that role as that strange nickel hybrid safety type. I do think there's utility for him there. I think he would be really good in that role. The problem is easy to probably get where you're getting at. We paid a top 40 pick here. So if he's not going to be a future safety and he's not going to play outside a corner, are we really saying that we spent a top 40 pick on a nickel corner long term? I think that is problematic. Easy. I mean, maybe they're just hoping people forget that aspect of things. And this dude's just such a good player that never comes into fruition, never gets talked about again. But yeah, I mean, if you're talking about allocation of resources and where you should be spending draft capital by position value, you probably got a point easy about him playing long-term as an outside corner or a safety. Cooper matches up well. He's very good at not biting on opening routes. On double moves, is that what you're referring to, Dank? Unspoken said he thinks that Isaiah Rodgers is the problem for Maddox. Yeah, I don't know how much Isaiah Rodgers has played, though, in terms of playing in the nickel. I think he's got all the movement ability in the world, Unspoken, to play the nickel spot. I mean, I said that when they first signed him. I can't act like I didn't mutter those words. I did. I said those words. I said, hey, man, I know he's played primarily as a field corner in Indianapolis. He's been a backup, but the dude's got all the freaking, underlying attributes you look for in terms of playing in the nickel. Still have to be able to work through traffic. You get what I'm saying? Unspoken. Like he's still got to show that he can work through the traffic at this level and be effective at doing that. But yes, I do think that you could make the case that depending on what they do with Cooper DeJean, that yeah, you're right. It could Isaiah Rodgers could be the real threat there to Maddox. I don't think you're coming out of left field with that one. I think like I can see your point there. I need Vic to start 2 rookies like Mitchell and Cooper as cornerbacks, and Eagles need to cut James Bradbury by June 1st. We'll see, Philly Ace 21. I don't know what they're going to do, man. CJ Gardner-Johnson is just as injury prone as Maddox. Yeah, I don't mind if a guy misses a game or two easy, especially if you have the depth. I think the thing that hurt us with Avonte Maddox was the lack of depth, and then the fact that he was starting to miss like significant time over 3 or 4 years. But I do see your point, easy. That he got injured for the vast majority of last season with Detroit, and he did miss a stretch of games with us playing safety. I thought his health was relatively stable as a nickel corner. I don't know. Easy. I don't know if there's I know that I criticized him early on in the 22 season because his angles and run pursuit were just terrible from the safety spot because he was learning it. But by the end of the year, I thought he was one of the best guys we had out there doing it. I'm not opposed to easy to saying that we don't fully know exactly how these dudes are aligning yet. I'm making a ton of assumptions. I think I have a solid perspective of why I'm making those assumptions, but ultimately we don't know until they get on the field how they're going to align them easy. I mean, we'll see. Ugba or Campbell. Ugba, I like Ugba, but the thing with Ugba is he didn't get on the field for Vic last year. So I don't know if that was injury related, Antonio. I'm not too sure. I'd have to look into that one. But if you want a veteran guy in terms of Campbell being an interior dude that you're going to take the snaps off of, yeah, I mean, Calais Campbell's a good football player, even though he's really old. He's incredibly talented football player. My bad, Worf. I appreciate the $4.99 super chat, man. Appreciate you, man. Said, I'm still worried about the linebackers in coverage in this scheme. Also, I would love to pick up Calais Campbell for defensive tackle depth for the right price. Yeah, I think you're kind of on the same thing that Antonio was talking about, to where we don't really know about that rotation. We don't really know about that depth at the interior D line. I think if everyone stays healthy, I don't think it's a huge concern, Worf. But the minute anyone goes down for a duration of games, 2, 3, 4 games, then I think we're all going to be like, oh boy, we should have added a veteran, during the offseason. Then I think you guys are going to be like, yeah, see, I told you, they should have added him. Like, yeah. Then I think you're right. If an injury happens, then yeah, I think we're really up the creek without a paddle there. To the linebackers in coverage. I don't know how much of that was just really faulty scheming last year. And I don't think that it was all Sean Desai's fault. I do think there were plays I could really pick out when it came to Nakobe, to where Nakobe has all the ability to be a good coverage backer, but he was allowing dudes to cross his face when he was guarding the hashes. So he would be an apex defender, which is basically you're an outside defender kind of lined up there as a linebacker. So you're going to be part of that strong side. So if they're playing 4-over-3, and you're an apex, then you're part of that coverage over there on the strong side of things. He would allow dudes that when he's supposed to defend the hash to cross his face. Now, I think he was doing a very good job of not allowing them to just go up the hash without being, impeded upon. I thought he did a good job there. But man, he was just allowing dudes to cross his face, and that is a problem. You can't have that happen, man. So yeah, I don't know Devin White. I don't know what to make of him in coverage yet, guys. I got to do a little bit more film study before I speak definitively on the young man. I will say that I was really impressed when I was doing my draft coverage with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I think he's a very underrated coverage guy. Yes, I mean, if you're going to man him up on somebody, is there going to be concerns? And name a linebacker you won't have concerns with, manned up in coverage. Like, of course, man. Like, unless there's a tight end where the linebacker's just got it's just a better athlete, any receiver, it's a mismatch. But I will say that I thought Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in terms of the zone, using his eyes, being exactly where he's supposed to be in his drops, not allowing dudes to cross his face, making sure he's guarding the hash as an apex defender. I thought I saw some pretty impressive stuff from him, Warv, to be quite honest. Fitness Warrior, what's good, buddy? I saw you in the live stream, actually. I saw on the playback. I saw you were in that live stream. How would you feel about Slay Mitchell, cornerback, Cooper DeJean, nickel, CJ Gardner-Johnson, and Rodgers at safety? Isaiah Rodgers at safety? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you would move that. I guess I'm assuming that you would have Rodgers play the free, or would you have him play the strong since he's playing nickel? I mean, some people feel like the nickel corner and the strong side safety, there's a lot, there's some similarities to the responsibilities they play, and it may be easy for them to flip. I will say, though, that when we were moving Avonte Maddox, it was normally to free and not strong. I do think that Isaiah Rodgers has a lot of underlying athleticism. I think if you played him in space as a free safety, probably is a little bit more intriguing to me. And then I guess you would move CJ Gardner-Johnson to the strong, but then you're talking about, you got to come down and be a force in the run game. CJ Gardner-Johnson's not afraid to do it. I mean, the young man will definitely come down. He's got the body size to be impactful, but to Easy's point, he has been injured in the past. I don't know, man. I mean, I'd have to see it work out. I'd have to see it work out on the field to judge it. Ojomo's numbers in college were better than Texas draftees Sweat and Murphy. Yeah, I really liked Ojomo coming out of college, Antonio, and I still think that there's something there to develop with him. But yeah, I agree with you that it's really going to depend upon if these dudes can push during camp. Like if they're not pushing, and it doesn't look like we have quality depth there, and it's these guys are more developmental still. I think you keep one or two of them as a developmental guy. But yeah, I probably would definitely either cut Tui Pelotu and then bring in a better established guy in terms of a veteran presence there, or you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think you're gambling. Easy said Gabe Hall had a very strong Senior Bowl, but weak tape. It's why he went undrafted. Interesting. I'm excited to see that. Then I haven't had a chance yet. Easy. I really haven't had a chance yet to like really get deep into his tape yet. I mean, I looked at some of his advanced analytics, and there were some intriguing things there, but I haven't had a chance to really review his tape yet. What's good, Dave? How you doing, bro? Says Gate. What's goody, Playboy? Hey, man, how you doing, bro? The thing is with Bradbury, he had his best year in his career in the Fangio type of scheme, so I wouldn't be surprised if we don't cut him. Yeah, War. I mean, it's an outcome that could happen, man. I mean, it's all projection at this point, right? We won't really know until the summer kind of kicks in. I mean, it is possible that they roll in that way and they play. They play them for one more year just for the cap perspective of things. It's not that they can't cut him and manage the cap, but you certainly do save some money by keeping them on the roster this year. Now, I do think that that's going to take a lot of people off. Or not that we have any control over any of it, but it probably would take a lot of people off because that probably means these young guys, unless there's injuries or just really ineffective play, are probably not going to see the field this year. And they would be more of the long-term, strong arm play for the following season because I would imagine next year, no matter what, both Slay and I'm going to say that probably Bradbury are gone. I think it's a very high probability next year, no matter what happens this year. But yeah, I think you got a point, man. Is Vic running a 34? Won't that wear down Davis and Carter as the season goes? No, it's not a true 34. But to be fair, Dave, there's not a lot of true 34s run anymore. What he's playing it's a mixed front, and it's he plays some odd fronts with that 50 front. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the video, to where I was kind of showing some of my elementary school version drawings to give you guys a perspective of the X's and O's and what it kind of looks like. But essentially what happens is, guys, is that they're going from that 50 front to where they're going to play either two things, either a tight front, so 2 4 eyes with a zero tech, and then 2 overhangs on the outside, and then you're in a 52 normally. So you're going to have 2 linebackers behind that, or they're going to play basically what they would call essentially the penny front, which is a 51 front, which is 2 4 eyes and a zero technique. Mind you, the zero technique can play shaded as well, guys. There's also, you could play a straight up 4 instead of a 4 eye. There's nothing to stop you from doing that in these fronts, but that's more of what you would call an eagle front, to be quite honest. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of confusion there because there's no more like really traditional 3-4 defenses run anymore. They've definitely been altered at this point. So you get a lot of these hybrid fronts that are a little bit of, they play a little bit of odd. So we play early down odd fronts, or very obvious run situations. We'll play odd front. And then, we play even front, on those pass rushing situations. I will say we've got to be better from an even front, Dave, at stopping the run. We were just absolutely, I was getting so frustrated last season with that crap. And to be honest with you, it really went back to the year prior too. In 22, we were having that problem from even fronts. We've gone to those 4-man fronts. What they were talking about earlier on in the podcast. They had the Birds 365 podcast where John kind of kicked over the hornet's nest and they just signed off on us. But they had this idea of okay, what do you do when you go from that tight front into that, which is the odd front, into the even front, to where you're playing what they call a tough front in that alignment, that 40 front. Man, we couldn't stop the run when teams would catch us off guard there for crap. What's up, Ray? How you doing, buddy? Yeah, Dank saying it's not a traditional 34. Yeah, exactly. There's not a lot of traditional 34s run anymore. Who do you want to see starting in our secondary? Good question, Unspoken. I got to see the way these dudes align, to be honest, and Unspoken. I think there's a ton of competition, and I don't think it's a straightforward answer right now. If it were me, I would rip the Band-Aid off and get these younger guys involved. I'm in favor of keeping Slade for one more year. You guys know I've been a Bradbury guy from the beginning, guys. I called for Bradbury years ago when he still had youth left in his legs. I wanted him to be here in Philadelphia. I'm a sucker for that style of corner on the boundary. That big, tall, physical guy with longer arm reach that can really disrupt passes and be a problem, right? Especially a very smart, zone-eyed guy that can really read and play inside a zone. I just think age caught Bradbury, or something happened internally last year in Bradbury. I don't know what happened. either age caught him or some dysfunction caught him. Something happened there. You guys know I was a sucker for Martin Emerson, who went to Cleveland. I was a sucker for Julius Brents, who went to Indianapolis. Julius Brents, I think, tested ridiculously well. I think some people don't understand the way those splits work and like what to look for sometimes. I think Julius Brents' test numbers were like, yeah, they intrigued the crap out of me. I thought Martin Emerson's film was really intriguing to me. And I think he was the year prior to Julius Brents. I've always kind of looked for that style of player, but I think that Fangio is just looking for, because I'll say this right now. If you guys are asking me like, oh, you were talking about the potential of Cooper DeJean playing the boundary side. Is he like, would you call him being in the aspects of a James Bradbury type corner? No, he's not. He's got adequate reach for a corner to play that position, but like, he's not super lengthy. You know what I mean? Like Emerson and Bradbury and like freaking Julius Brents. Like, it's not quite that. But I mean, he's got the eyes that we talk about with Bradbury. Those eyes are there in terms of that side of things. But I would probably rip the Band-Aid off and play some of the more younger guys unspoken. I think the nickel cornerback position, I'm going to play the best guy and I'm going to ensure myself there. Right? So if Avonte Maddox wins the competition, he wins the competition. If the young kid Tyler that we picked up from the Vegas Raiders wins it, he should start there. If Isaiah Rodgers is that guy, it's just that athleticism is just, he's just head and shoulders above everybody else, I'm playing him there. You know what I mean? Like, it's, if they decide to move Cooper DeJean there and that dude's just the best guy for the job, that's what I'm playing. Like in the nickel, like we got to be better there, man. That crap ate us up last year. We couldn't cover the slot for crap last year. I think you just got to be better in terms of that. The secondary, I think you get into a lot of into the weeds, man. Get into the weeds quite a bit. Ray said, hi, coach, just came in. Do you think we use Sidney Brown as a hybrid linebacker safety and a big nickel defense often? I mean, to an extent, yes. He's going to come down as a force defender, I think, at times. How much he's going to play in coverage in the slot, I don't know. I think he's got some development to do there, Ray, to be quite honest. I think the raw athleticism is there. I think that dude is a great force defender in the run game. I don't know that the nuance is quite there yet in terms of making sure that you're in the right spot and staying in phase with receivers and coverage. I think there's got to be some advancement there. But man, that kid is, Sidney Brown is an A+ athlete. Cooper's best role is as a robber playing freestyle safety with his awareness in the ball track. The ball in front of him. Yeah. You need quick hips to play the nickel. Fluid hips. Yeah. You got to be a good lateral mover. You also got to be able to work through traffic, which I think is the under discussed explanation of it. My guy Dave says, thank you for explaining that. I was a little worried. Yeah. I mean, the 30 fronts are really hard just because you don't see them run so much anymore, like the traditional 30 fronts, right? Where you would see like the Okie stuff and things like that. It's where you would have like 3 guys 2 gapping on the line. Then you would have like, one of your linebackers is coming down and maybe overhanging and is going to rush. The other guy's going to drop out, and that's going to be a certain percentage of plays where they're doing that. You don't see that run so much anymore, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely borrowing elements of 40 and 30 fronts together to form the system, that mixed front. Unspoken said our practice habits have to change. We couldn't tackle it all. We have to do something. Yeah, the pursuit angles were incredibly horrible at times. Dank said, I think that holding call got to him like he never got over it, so he didn't play as aggressively. Yeah, Tyler Hall. Thank you, Antonio. I appreciate you, buddy. Said, play the young guys. Yep. Plus, putting him on an island and man with no safety help didn't do him any favors. Yeah, yes, that's true. Dank, he definitely bid on some double moves. It was efficient of a secondary for sure. Yeah, they were trying. They were throwing all the darts at the board, hoping anything stuck there. What's up, Jeff? How you doing, buddy? He said, I live in the small town of DeBerry, Florida, the hometown of Jalix. Oh, that's cool, man. That's awesome, dude. Jalix went to University High School where my son attends now. I was probably a mile away when Jalix called Howie Big Pimpin'. Too funny. Oh, that's awesome, man. That's cool. Antonio said, I love the DeJean pick, but I also thought it was overkill with cornerbacks, especially after signing Maddox back, Tyler Hall, and Isaiah Rodgers back from suspension. Plus, you sign another cornerback, Sean Stevens. I think he's got to work his way onto the roster, though. I like Sean Stevens' upside, man. I really do, Antonio. I think there's some upside here with this young man. But I don't know that he's a lock to make the roster. But I do think he could potentially push. Once you push, anything's in play, right? We saw that with Eli Ricks. Your first step, get attention. Your second step, make a freaking play. Your third step, make the decision tough. Like, I think that back end of the roster, that fourth, fifth kind of, you know what I mean? Like when I say fourth, fifth, talking about outside corners, guys, not counting the nickel stuff. When you talk about those backup roles to the outside, where special teams will come into play there as well, I think that competition is going to be quite good, man. I really do, Antonio. I'm excited to, not that I really love preseason games, but if there was any reason for a preseason game and have it televised to see, yeah, I think that's one of them. Injuries made it that much worse. Yeah, absolutely, guys. Forgot about McPherson. Also, yeah, McPherson too. Yeah, Zach McPherson. I'm wondering where he's at following that. I think he was an ACL, right? Wasn't it, guys? Back in training camp. Yeah. We're gonna see. It's gonna be a lot of competition, as Dank's kind of pointing here. There's gonna be a ton of competition in this camp. All right, guys. I appreciate y'all so much. I gotta jump off here because within like another 30 to 45 minutes, I gotta get this baby set up again for another feeding. So fortunately, these feedings come up fast. I will tell you guys, I am still working on a video for you guys. I'm not completely finished yet, but we're working on the offensive side of the ball, guys. I'm breaking down some of the run scheme stuff that I saw from Kellen Moore. That's coming up, guys. I was planning on trying to get that out today, but then I saw the Hornets nest get kicked over by John McMullen. I was like, oh boy, yeah, I got to go cover that now. I'll answer a couple questions real quick, guys. Who do you think will be running back to? Good question. You're talking about, do I think that there's a chance between the young man that we got from the 49ers, between Shipley and then between Gainwell? It's a great competition. I'm going to say until Gainwell gets knocked out, I'm going to say Gainwell's got to be your guy until he gets knocked out, but keep your eye on Shipley. Keep your eye on Shipley and Pierce, the young kid, the young man that we got from the 49ers. He's got some size, and he's a pretty dang good pass pro back. This dude can pass protect. So I think that competition is going to be way better than people expect. I don't think Gainwell's a lock. And I don't know what they do. If Gainwell isn't your number 2 to even keep him, that's the other side of things. Burt Barry McPherson's job. Job, maybe Maddox cut. See you, Coach. Appreciate you, China. Peace out. Hey, man, I appreciate you, Antonio. All right, guys, I appreciate y'all so much. I'm going to end this stream. Thank you guys so much. And yeah, guys, I'll be back with another video. I promise.